This is going to be kind of a long-winded kudo, if you don't mind. Just got onto this, and this is hot off the press, so to speak. A gentleman by the name of Damon Pretty sent out a little publication on Facebook, and it has to do with the boys in uniform. And I'm going to just read this because I think it's very, very important. I want to give all of us want to give a big kudo to Damon Pretty and his associates out there at Hampton Inn. Damon writes, I am excited to see and impressed with the community support. We have an active duty soldier with the U.S. Army headed for home from overseas for a short family visit, staying at one of our hotels tomorrow as a part of the trek home to Michigan. Long story short, thanks to Amber, and best special thanks to you, Amber, at the front desk for sharing this info. We found out and are happy to upgrade and comp his stay. When I called his dad to let him know we were not taking his honor points, I was shameless in drumming up, let me see here. Oh yes, here we are. I'm holding a computer in my hand, folks, bear with me. Anyway, apparently soldiers and military have honor points that they can stay at these places. And Mr. Pretty will not honor his honor points. He wanted him to stay as a comp. We appreciate that. They also asked for a list of his son's favorite snacks, and he was surprised and grateful we would ask. Then he says, I went to the American Legion after thinking I wanted to line the street with flags. Sadly, many of their flags are at the cemetery for the holiday, but they gave me 30. Needing more, I went to Ace to ask for flags. They needed a letter to fax to corporate, but it said it should not be a problem. Within the hour, they approved and gave us 30 flags. The soldier is driving and headed home for another 5 hours when he leaves us Saturday. He'll need gas. BP and Casey stepped up and gave me $50 for him. Crackle Barrel will be feeding him dinner. Culver's gave certificates of fund for the rest of his trip to Michigan. We have a basket of his favorites will be waiting in his suite, and ice-cold Coors Light in the fridge. We found out how he liked that by checking with his family. So our entrance tomorrow will be decked out in 60 flags as he pulls into our lot the night before he sees his family. We are thankful. I am thankful. And I'm glad the community supported our efforts to welcome him back to his home country. Well, that's just a feel-good story, folks. Those of us who served in the military means a little extra to us. Those of you who have not, for whatever reasons, I know it's very important to you, and I think it's just great that the community stepped up to the plate like that. And thank you, Mr. Maxwell, for that very much. That's a big help. And in that vein, let's just go ahead and give community thanks and kudos to the folks over in Lincoln Avenue who whooped our tails again with the flag battles on Flag Day, which was coming up June 14th, Memorial Day, Monday. And Troy Hanger and Norman Newhouse and Dr. Dave Gerlach, and I think Becky Worth in there too. Her place was in West Troy did that. Anyway, boy, they had flags flying plenty on Lincoln Avenue, so congratulations to them. Big kudos to them all. Why don't we get serious?
Well,
introduce our guest.
We've got kind of a lucky day going here. We're just hearing about all kinds of good things that people are involved in, and one of them is a book called Generosity, the story of Logan County, Illinois during the Great War, 1917 to 1919.
Yeah, let's don't get that confused with the Great War of World War II era. As Bill, the comedian George Gobel once said about that, he was on Johnny Carson's show, and Johnny asked him about his service. And he said, "Oh yeah, that was during the Second War." I said, "You must have read about it. It was in all the papers."
I remember that show. I watched that one. Yeah.
One of the great lines I ever heard. So,
well, Mr. Dona, thank you so much for being here today. Bill has your book, and I was looking at it, and I'm amazed at the time it must have taken you to do all this research. It's very impressive. And even though I may not have known these families firsthand, it was so fun to see the pictures of the people and read about it.
Well, thank you, Judy and Bill, for having me here again today. It's been a number of years since the last time I was in. But, yeah, this book, Generosity, was 5 years in the making, 5 years of research, reading newspapers, looking at documents, online research, gathering all that information. And that's the fun part of doing this sort of thing. Now, a lot of people get confused about my books, the Civil War books that I did, and now this World War I book, as being about the wars. And it's not about the wars. It's about the people of Logan County who experienced that time period and how they stepped up to support the activities of the government during those periods of time. Generosity has 17 chapters. Chapter 1 is about, probably should have been chapter 17, but it was so important to me that I put it up front because it talks about the Logan County War History Committee at the time, and they collected all kinds of information about the boys who went off to war, the war workers, the nurses, people around here in the YMCA and the Red Cross. All those articles from the papers were clipped and put in these big albums that are at the Lincoln Public Library. And I discovered those, and they filled in the spots where I was missing things. So, and I got to wondering, well, how did they know to put that together?
Yes.
Well, there's this guy named L.B. Stringer. You know that name?
Yes.
He was a member of the Illinois Historical Society, and judge, and all that in Logan County, and he was on that committee. So he gave guidance to the folks to know what to select to put into this collection. That collection's been digitized. Once I found it, I photographed the whole thing, indexed it, so if anybody looking for information on their families or the activities that were going on at the time can go to the library or to the Logan County Genealogical and Historical Society and access that information on the computer, so they don't have to go through those big books. Chapter 2 deals specifically with what happened with the Red Cross, who stepped up, they organized chapters in all the little towns in the county, all the stuff that was made there, and they made bedclothes, they made garments for hospital patients, bandages, all kinds of stuff. Brought it all to Lincoln, boxed it all up, sent it to Chicago.
And fundraisers.
And fundraisers. Of course, they had to get a lot of money, so there was a lot of donating to that. There was one story about the chicken in Atlanta that raised $150 at an auction because somebody would buy it for $10, donate it back, it would get sold again for another $10, and you know, things like that. There was a large, what they called a kermesse at the Lincoln House, and they had the women's club involved in that, and they had all kinds of demonstrations from different countries around the world, and raised thousands of dollars at that, so that they could put the money towards making these artifacts, or I call them, you know, the historians speak in there, but the items that they needed in the hospitals. They not only worked for the hospitals, they worked for the relief in Europe.
Yes. Because
the Belgians were badly beaten up, a lot of orphans over there. Yeah. So they made clothing for the orphans and foods and things and sent it over. The chapter 3 was, excuse me, was dealing with the alien enemies, the Germans and Austrians who were living in the county, who were not naturalized yet, and how they worked at getting them documented as being alien enemies, and they were treated as alien enemies too. But there were, excuse me, quite a number. I was surprised at the number of non-naturalized Germans that were in the county at the time.
I suppose many of them could have been here for a good while.
Yes, there was one story they had to register, of course.
Yes.
And there was one story about a farmer who had come over with his parents in 1869, and he didn't know if his father had been naturalized. Well, if the father hadn't been naturalized, then he wouldn't be naturalized.
No.
So he came into the sheriff's office and said, I don't know if I'm a German national or an American national. He says, I voted in every election since I've been old enough to vote.
Interesting.
I just assumed I'm a citizen. So you come across stories like that. It was just kind of funny in a way, and bring a little humor to what's going on in the county at a very, very serious time in our history. There were, I think, 48 women. They registered the men first, thinking they would be the terrorists or whatever of that period.
I see.
And they, I think there were 32 males that were registered and 48 females. Had to be over 14, so there were a lot of daughters involved in there, I guess. And they ran that program up till the Armistice Day, and then it was dropped after that.
That's a little known bit of history.
Yes, it is.
Very few people would know that,
Yep.
unless you had researched it.
And along with that, there's a chapter on how the German heritage changed during that period of time, because the German American National Bank became the American National Bank. The German Lutheran churches became the Lutheran churches. So the German name was dropped from almost everything. Almost everything. So that heritage was changed at the time. The German newspaper, the Volksblatt, it was a German language newspaper. It was required to have 2 columns, one in the German, one in the English. Of course, it didn't last very long after that requirement came in, so the German part was dropped. And then German was stopped in the churches, because there were a lot of German congregations, German parochial schools for the Lutheran churches. The German was dropped there. There was even one story from the state level that they fired all the German interpreters.
Oh, really?
And I said, what's the logic in that? How are you going to know what they're saying?
Did you get an answer to your question?
No.
Nobody could explain the logic. No.
It was never explained, but it was that vehement. You know, they stopped teaching German in the high schools.
German language spoken into homes was just as common.
Oh, yes. Every branch of my family I go back on, I get back to Germany. So there was all that was affecting them at that time. And then conservation of food and fuel, especially the fuel, because the fuel had to go into the war effort. Coal for the ships, so we had to cut back, and there were activities on getting people to use less coal. The school children were sent around with these tags to put on the coal shovels, 1 less shovelful per day.
Really?
Yeah, and they delivered them to every house in the county. So the kids actually tied it on the shovel. So,
do you think that today people would band together the way they did then?
I would hope that they would come to that realization. But, you know, after World War II, the government took over supplying all the bandages and the hospital clothing. So the people, since World War II, haven't been asked to put forward that effort to support what the government is doing in those areas. And we've lost a lot of that. You belong to organizations, as I do, and trying to get volunteers to come in to help out is nigh on impossible. And there's just very limited numbers of people willing to do that anymore.
Well, a part of that is the social mores that have taken place. Television came along and had a huge impact. It used to be, Bill and listeners, that lodge members, whether it be the Elks, the Eagles, the Moose, or whatever. It was kind of a night out for the man. And lodge night. And
Yes.
Amos and Andy's Mystic Nights at the Sea. But seriously, they went out for an evening out with the men,
Yep.
and that was very common. To go to a lodge today, it's difficult to get enough to have a quorum to open up for the meeting.
Yes.
And that's just the way it is.
Now, back in the days of the First World War, the DAR was very actively involved in Logan County,
Yes.
helping
And they
with all
still
the
are
things.
today.
Yes.
Let me tell
The
you.
DAR was asked to work with the Logan County War History Committee, and they did most of the heavy labor there. They collected the photographs. They collected what they called the individual service records. As the guys came back, whoever was working for the DAR and the Women's Club was tied into this too. So they were hand in hand working on this project, and they would hand out these forms for the soldiers to fill out, or whoever else might have done work. I've got one for Felicity Oglesby, Governor Oglesby's daughter, who worked over there. But they filled these things out, and it's not something you find at Ancestry. It's not something you find online anywhere. It's at the Lincoln Public Library, and we've got copies at the Logan County Genealogy and Historical Society. So those things are available now where they weren't before. And that's if people are looking for that period of time and looking for things that were going on in the county, or trying to find family members from that period. It's there. It's available.
It's about research. And you know what? We're about research too here at WLCN. If you will just look and pay attention, you will find and research. These are some of the greatest commercials you ever heard. Go right ahead, Mr. Ash. Welcome back to Viewpoint, the program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. Well, we have a perspective, and we have a great personality. Bill Donath, Lincoln historian, is our guest this morning. He's talking about a new book. This is one of, what, 3 that you've written, Bill?
This is the third, yes.
Third book, Generosity, and it's about Lincoln, Logan County, and World War II, or One. I'm sorry about that. Billy, were you a student in history when you were a kid in school?
No, I hated memorizing all those dates and stuff. It was.
Well, you become a real student of history now as you become
After I
an author.
retired, I got into genealogy, which was an interest. So I started looking through things to find family stuff, family information. Ended up running across articles, the letters from the guys from the Civil War that were in the paper. And that became my first book.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to know about the guys whose names were on the monument for the Civil War. So I started collecting that information, and that became the book that came out just about the time the statue came down in 08 when it was damaged. And I got involved with the committee, then we replaced that statue, and people on the committee were talking, well, why don't we have an Abraham Lincoln statue? And we stayed together and got the Abraham Lincoln statue on the square. So we're really proud of getting those two jobs done.
Rightfully so. I might add, we should add, Judith, that Bill is one of those movers and shakers at our Logan County Genealogical Society. Listen, folks, if you don't know about that, that's a sleeper operation there on Chicago Street. You can't get to it now because of all the work on the
you can't get there from here.
But they do a tremendous job, and for a while I was a volunteer there, and my job was to file away the obituaries. Well, they fired me. The reason for the firing was I didn't get any filing done. I got too busy reading all the obituaries.
They say you can't fire a volunteer, but I too have been fired as a volunteer, so it can happen if you don't watch your P's and Q's.
I found it tremendously interesting, and I commend the place to you for there's just so much So much going on in there, and you got a lot of volunteers. But back to the business at hand. You were at chapter 4, I think, in your book, Bill.
Well, before we get to that,
Yes,
follow up
please.
on your Genealogy Society thing. We do have a garage sale this weekend. It's Friday and Saturday. It's one of our bigger fundraisers of the year.
Okay.
So please come in and take our junk and leave your money. So,
It's
but we
okay
have
to
some
walk a half
really
block.
nice things listed. We have some antique things that people would really be interested in. So, and for people who are interested in becoming a member of the society, annual dues are $15. You get 4 quarterlies every
Boy, that's
year,
a lot of money.
and that's it just covers the cost of producing the quarterlies, and that's about
what it
it.
would be, yeah.
Maybe you
So-
better nail down a little your garage sale that you're having. Tell us the hours and so
Oh, that's
forth.
good because it was on Facebook this morning. So
I wasn't.
we're probably,
Yeah, there are a few people out there who don't see that. So
tell you the truth, the hours I work from 11 to 4 up there on Fridays, and that's about the only hours I know. But I'm sure it's going to be early morning till mid-afternoon. Up to probably till 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock maybe, and then and then Saturday would probably be a close out at 1. So that's what's happened the last couple of years that we've done that.
Good for you.
So Genealogy Society is always willing to take new members. So,
yeah, but it's an interesting thing to do. You know, as I say, folks, when they look around, you'll be amazed at what's just on the shelves there.
yeah, we collect everything in paper form. So and that's what happens. That's why there's. Yeah, I need to say that not only besides the collection from the library on the World War I information, everything I collected is at the society. Every piece of paper that I put through a scanner is on the computer, so that if I was picking up articles for a soldier, say, let's pick one, Don Murphy. Don Murphy was an ambulance driver. Don Murphy was also a good correspondent, and he wrote lots of letters. I probably have 190 or so documents from Don Murphy, just about his
First-hand
activities.
Observations of what he was doing.
Yes, because he would write about the war. He was taken prisoner. He wrote about his time as being prisoner and what happened to him. So, those kinds of things are there. He's the most. I've got the most on him. Let's put it that way. I've got a couple pictures of him and with his ambulance and without. So it's all that stuff is still here, and it's a lot more than what's in the book. And
I
people
bet
need to know that that's available too.
You must feel awfully close to these people by the time you've researched all
You
their
get
comings and
to
goings.
you get to know some of the guys. One fellow from Middletown by the name of Bill Murphy, William Kirby, and he went in as a private, came out as a lieutenant. So he went through all of that. I've got a picture of him when he went in as a private, young kid,
Yeah.
clean
as could be.
face, no lines in his face at all. And afterwards, the stress, the lines of age, it looked like he aged 4 years in that 20 months.
Interesting.
Probably did.
It probably
you
did.
know.
He
Oofta.
did. But after the war, he became a minister. I'm still finding articles about him as I keep reading past the war years. Ran into one last week where he came out of the seminary and he was going to be sent to a lumber camp. He ended up going to an Indian reservation. So it's amazing what you learn, and you get to know these guys and you follow them after a while. So,
You know what
Where was
occurs
the-
to me? Go ahead, Judith.
Where was the reservation? We don't have many here.
well,
in
this was
area.
Wyoming.
Wyoming.
Yeah, he went to the cemetery or seminary.
Sounds alike.
Yeah.
But they mean the same.
But he was here in the States somewhere up around Chicago area, and then was assigned out there. So,
right.
so it's amazing. Yeah.
Well, Bill, you're still investing a prodigious amount of time reading and researching, even though you've completed generosity.
Yeah, at the end of the war, just prior to the end of World War I, a disease started that we called Spanish flu. And Spanish flu was more deadly than the war. One out of every 10 people who got it died.
Oh my.
And it especially hit the young mothers. You know of William Maxwell, the famous author.
Yeah.
His mother died in the early 1919 because of Spanish flu, just after having given birth.
Oofta.
I knew his daddy real well,
Yeah.
by the way. He was a great gentleman. He had a part in our wedding.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I hid my car in his garage when Gene and I were married, so nobody'd get to it.
So I'm still picking up on those articles about the Spanish flu.
Yeah.
But getting back to this book, I find some interesting stories as I go through all of this stuff, and one of them was about Walter Niebuhr of the Niebuhr family. Reinhold and Helmuth were the theologians. Walter was the correspondent. He traveled the world and got information, kind of like a travelogue type of person. And at the time, he had already been to Europe, and he had visited the Kaiser, interviewed the Kaiser. And the Kaiser wasn't even seeing the ambassador from the United States at the time.
And Niebuhr
he couldn't get an appointment, and Niebuhr was in there talking to him. So, you run across those stories. And since Walter was from that German church, German Evangelical Lutheran Church, which we now know as St. John's, it was a subversive thing in the news. He was supposedly took messages to the Kaiser that the Germans were going to keep America out of the war, and all of this, the fake news stuff that we hear about.
The more
today.
things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah,
don't
exactly,
they? Yeah,
exactly.
Right. You can read that very article today.
So, those are just, and there's a chapter on the Gold Star list of the 74 guys who died during the war. Half of them died of Spanish flu, either at the camps where they were training or overseas at the camps where they were where they were. I have a separate chapter for the black soldiers from Logan County. 35. It surprised me that there would have been that many, but since they had a separate army, I figured they needed a separate chapter. So we have a chapter on the black soldiers.
With pictures, by the way.
With pictures.
Yes.
And in chapter 17, which is the last chapter, I put all the information about the soldiers and the workers and the people that supported the war. They were, 2,500, I think I put together. So each one has a paragraph. If I had the individual service record, I put all that information in there. If I could find stuff online at Ancestry or whatever on them, I added that. If I didn't have their photograph and I could get to find a grave, I used their gravestone a picture. One of the black soldiers was Charles Townsend, and Charles died over there, was killed. In the cleanup afterwards, the Germans left France. They left behind a lot of munitions.
Yes.
And we had these details go in and haul those munitions to a safe place. Well, he was working at getting one of these cleaned up, and there was an explosion that killed him, and quite a few others as well. So his picture is in the book. The story of his death is in the book. And I have the service record for him that was filled out for the DAR, was filled out by his father. So those people who died, a family member would fill this thing out for them.
I suspect he was a forebearer of my friend Lee Townsend,
Preston Townsend, what his dad's name.
I suspect. Go right ahead, Billy.
And then we have, the war workers. Have a picture in there of Judy, or Dorothy Judy. Judy's the last name. And Dorothy worked for the government in Washington, D.C., and two of her girlfriends from Atlanta, they were all from Atlanta, also worked out there. So I learned about the two others reading about
Judy.
Her. So, and then there was a photograph of her in the Atlanta paper that I used in the book. So it's amazing the types of things that you learn. And did I say Dorothy had a sister named Maud?
No.
Who was a nurse during the war and at one of the camps. So there's just and I've got all those articles. I scan them into my computer, and I've got them all. So they're there at the society. You just go to the soldier records. There are alphabetical order.
And they're there.
Find the one you want and read all the articles that I collected on that particular person. So, and
5 years in the making.
5 years.
You had to go at it tooth and nail to get it done in 5 years.
Well, yeah. But we haven't gotten to why I called it generosity yet.
Yeah, really.
I was going to say, let's address that, because I thought that was an interesting take and an unusual title for a book. So let's address that, Bill.
The word generosity came out of the fact that so many people stepped up and did so much, and they donated so much money, and we didn't get to the Liberty Loan program, which was really the big one that got me to thinking about the generosity. There were 5 Liberty Loans beginning in April of 1917, going all the way for 2 years into 1919.
The purpose of which was to support the war.
Support the war. And in every one of those, Logan County provided more money than was anticipated, than was expected. To the point at the end of the thing, they were at 146% of what they were asked to give. So they got 1.5 times more than they were expected to give.
Real generosity.
And it wasn't really giving, it was investing, because it was a loan. That's why they call it a loan.
Yes.
We loaned our money to the government to pay for the war. They paid us back, and the interest rates, you'll be interested to know, ranged from 3.5% to 4.5%.
Think of that.
Wouldn't you like to get that today?
Yeah, think of that. Yeah.
Dream on.
1916, 17,
So those are items that, and because of that, Logan County was designated the top in the 53 county area that they worked at. As a reward, Logan County was given a trophy German captured cannon. And it came in, you probably remember this, Bill. You probably remember that cannon.
You going to the courthouse?
It was at the courthouse first, and then they moved it over to Latham Park.
Okay.
And it sat west of the bandstand, pointed towards Kickapoo Street. And it stayed there until World War II. And the metal recycling, they put that cannon back to Germany as munitions. So, we'd like to have it here because it's part of Logan County history, but at the same time, it helped in the effort with the war.
That's what happened to all the metal girders in that wonderful structure at Chautauqua, that great big brown beautiful.
Oh, that's where that went. Okay, I was wondering about that.
Yes, and they had tons and tons of metal steelwork in there, and that went to the war effort.
Wow. Yeah. Thanks for that, Bill. Yeah. So we have this theme of generosity occurring in every one of the activities that came along. I've got letters from the heads of like Red Cross reporting back to the county about the quality of the exceptional quality, I should say, of the materials that those ladies put together. And it's just in everything that happened, it was first rate. It wasn't just mediocre and average. It was a way above average.
Well, it's kind of an interesting corollary, but that's that German influence. The folks did things well. We had a lot of German Americans.
Yes,
in
we
this
did.
Community. And when it was done right.
Yes.
And that came from the old country.
Yep.
So it's kind of interesting. Our devotion to doing it right, to get back to Germany.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. I was really pleased at the way people stepped up then. I hope whoever does the World War II book on Logan County follows up on that. But
I nominate you.
No, I'm not going to live long enough to do that kind of research.
Well, the amount of time you put on this one, I think you might be right.
For the stuff that, here's a picture of the cannon.
Look at that.
I don't know if you catch that, but they're in Latham Park.
Think of that.
And the house that you see behind the cannon, the big old house there, I don't know if you noticed that.
It was a Latham
When you looked
house.
at the book, it's the Latham house.
Yeah, I remember that very well.
Yeah. So that is the story. Not all the story. I can't give you all 358 pages of the book in this short time. But
do you think we can get your history teachers of your youth to give you an A?
John Ryman. You remember John?
Yeah.
Yeah, John
Nice
made it
man.
interesting. We had a student teacher at the time, but I can't remember
You young
her
enough
name.
to have John Ryman as your teacher?
Oh, I'm young enough, yeah.
Holy mackerel. I didn't know we had a kid in the studio with us this morning. I didn't realize that. Yeah. I'll tell you, a history teacher at Lincoln College who could just make it come alive, and that was her name was Anna Lee Bailoff.
Oh, yes.
C.A. Bailoff's wife.
Mm-hmm.
She made history. When I was in high school, history was like you, dates and all that pretty dry stuff.
Yeah.
But she didn't. It came alive with her.
Yeah.
And if you had a guy like John Ryman, he sure whetted your interest, I'll tell you that.
Yes.
Now, how are the sales of the book? Let's just pump the sales of the book right
good.
now. Where does the person buy a Generosity?
Okay, Generosity can be bought at the Logan County Genealogical Historical Society, so ask to see it when you're in for the garage sale. And there are a few copies at the bookstore at the Heritage Museum,
Prairie Years?
Lincoln College.
Okay.
No Prairie Years, I don't have it there. What I do with the book is the people who are selling it pay me what I have in it, what it cost me to print it.
Yeah.
And then they resell it and they get the profit.
Mm-hmm.
So all I get back is what I spend on it.
Which was considerable, by the way.
Well,
very
You're
very
not paid for your time, are you?
no.
No.
These kind of books, if you were selling them across country and there were millions of people buying them, but it's a local interest thing, and it's Logan County, 33,000 people.
Well, you've done us a great service, Bill Donath, in investing 5 years of your time and considerable portion of your own treasure in getting this published. Generosity is the name of the book that we're discussing this morning. It's about Lincoln, Logan County in World War I times. I commend it to you for your reading. It's a great book just to have in the house. Something might come up, and there's just all sorts of interesting facts and figures and a lot of great pictures. Bill, we always try to close Viewpoint with a comment or two about the subject matter of the day, history. I read once where Clarence Darrow said, "History repeats itself, and that's the problem with history." Thank you, Bill Donath.
Thank you.